Thanks for coming. Corey Frazee with Stevens & Associates, and I represent Mike Renault with Renault Gravel Inc., who owns this property, Hidden Acres Campground, and the ABF Trucking Facility. Two properties together, about 40 acres. And we also represent SB Lands. Tim Severance is here for SB Lands. They own the adjacent parcel, which has an existing gravel pit under it with an existing Act 250 permit. This property also has an existing Act 250 permit for the campground. We are requesting a new land use to start a gravel pit operation. So what I would like you to see is the proposed gravel pit is to the east of the existing campground on about 12 acres back in the woods. I think it's a good idea for us to walk back there. Okay. We can see the existing gravel pit from this property, but it's about 50 feet of excavation. So if we want to actually get into that gravel pit, the best idea is probably to get back in our cars, drive around about a half a mile and go into that gravel pit.
Why don't we go back there?
Start there,
Get a sense of the view.
Yes.
And I've seen a few gravel pits in my day.
Yes. So while we're standing here, the access to SB Lands gravel pit will remain as it is coming in from Dummerston Station Road.
Remember, this is just an overview.
Okay.
Okay.
So the access to Renault's property is through this existing trucking facility immediately adjacent to us. There is an existing gravel road that goes down the back side of the truck facility, and I will point to that as we get there. So the access road comes down an existing gravel road. There's a garage right there. So there's an existing road built already, and the road will continue where those birch trees are initially it will go into the existing SB Lands pit, because we're requesting a kind of a joint operation for these two operations to work together. Right. And then eventually the road will shift and it'll run along the property line. There are some existing campsites here. You can see the topography goes up to a knoll, and then, excuse me?
Is that all ledge under there?
There is a ledge, yes, there's a ledge outcropping at the top. Then on the back side, it flattens out. There's a fairly wide terraced area, which is the proposed gravel pit. And
so this kind of berm atmosphere that you're going to have here is going to remain. The excavation's on the far side.
That's right.
Okay, so you're going to have this buffer.
That's right.
And you're going to continue operating there. Good. What else?
Well, if you don't want to walk any farther, that's about it, I guess.
Okay.
There's a pond right there, a small pond right there, and so we had Rebecca Chalmers with wetlands down.
On the road.
Okay. Yep. So we were keeping buffers from the pond when we build the access road.
So basically, what we got is Route 5. We're going to have a campground. We're going to have a nice buffer here, and then the gravel pit behind it, and I-91 behind that.
That's correct.
Okay. Anything anybody wants to point out to us?
Yes, I would. Can you explain to him what between here and our homes, what the area is going to look like?
Yes, there is an existing recreational field.
Right.
That is in the southeast corner of the property, and that will remain. That rec field is currently used by campers and other public entities for activities.
So that's open to the public?
No, it's not open to the public. Mike has an agreement with, they have dog competitions there. But, you know, there is some activities that go on in that campground.
Yeah, but do the homeowners in that community have access to those fields? No. I'm sorry?
There's a fence there.
Okay.
So we don't know the separate properties.
Okay. So, but it is the recreational field for the campground, for lack of a better term. It is also on the other side of this berm. That will remain. The excavation for the gravel pit will be in the woods.
Again, we'll memorialize that on the record. Remember, we've already seen all of these plans and maps and have a good sense of what it is. This just gives us a better confirmation of what it looks like. So, nothing. Then drive carefully. We'll see you all back at the Dummerston Town office. Good morning. My name is Mike Bernhardt, Chair of the District 2 Environmental Commission. On my left is Judy Schmitz, fellow commissioner. On my right is April Hensel, the District 2 coordinator, and we'll be hearing this application with just 2 commissioners, which is statutorily appropriate. Our 3rd commissioner is somewhere wandering in the fog, someplace. It is Wednesday, January 30th, 2013, approximately 10 a.m. We're in the town of Dummerston to hear application 2W0680-5, filed by Renault Gravel and SB Land Partnerships to open a new gravel pit and expand the utilization of an existing gravel pit. We have completed the site visit, and we're now going into the formal portion of the hearing. The only record of this hearing is the recording that is running now on local cable TV. That formal recording will not be transcribed unless any of the parties care to have it transcribed, and they do so at their own expense. This is a quasi-judicial process, so I'm going to ask those of you who will be participating to please raise your right hands. Right hand. Anybody who's has a chance of saying anything, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give on the matter under consideration is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. The way we're going to proceed today is that we're going to ask the applicant, through their representative, to give us an overview of the project. And the commission has reviewed the submissions, the initial submission and all subsequent submissions, and have found that for the most part everything is in order and accepted as submitted, except we want to go further in depth to the following criteria. 1B, waste disposal, which we had some comments from the state on yesterday. 5, traffic. 8, aesthetics, in particular noise. 9, D and E, earth resources, the impact of the extractions. And 9K, the visual impacts on public investments off I-91. So we're going to kind of address those issues. Everything else appears in order. Now, in order to try and tie comments to individuals, I'm going to ask you to please state your name and your relationship to the hearing.
Michael Renault,
Corey Frazee with Stevens and Associates, civil engineer representing the applicants.
Councilor.
Chris Dugan, counsel for Renault Gravel team.
Bob Fisher, counsel for the town of Dummerston.
Tom Bodett, town of Dummerston Select Board.
Sir, back.
Mike Fair from the Reformer.
Okay.
Paul Nevendor, just an interested citizen.
Lou Sorensen, citizen. I'm also a member of the Dummerston DRB, but don't plan any testimony unless there's questions from the commission.
Megan Thompson, V-Trans.
Mark Pickering, V-Trans, District 2.
Kelly McHugh, homeowner, Copper Commons.
Lee Chamberlain, road foreman, town of Dummerston.
Sir.
David Baxendale, S&B Land.
Tim Severance, S&B Land.
Steve Glayback, Dummerston Select Board.
Brian Barrow, Putney, road foreman.
And young lady who just wandered in, your name, please.
Cynthia Stoddard, town manager, Putney.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see
Oh,
it.
Charlotte Annis, zoning administrator, Dummerston.
I'm sorry?
Charlotte Annis, zoning administrator, Dummerston.
Thank you.
Is everybody signing the sign-up sheet? It's getting around? Good. With emails, please.
Okay. Now, Corey,
Yes, sir.
Again, for the record, please, why don't you give us an expurgated version of what the application is about?
Okay. I had a PowerPoint presentation, and due to the space and not knowing where we were going to be, April and I agreed I'd make copies of the PowerPoint presentation. Take 5 to 10 minutes to go through it if you'd like. Does that sound like a reasonable overview?
It's your application.
Okay.
Based on what I have stated as far as the application and the criteria that we're particularly interested in,
Yep.
why don't you just submit those as formal pieces of evidence and give us an overview of that formal presentation so we can get right to the criteria that we have questions about.
Simple.
Okay. It's okay?
Thank you.
Yes. And I should give copies to everyone at this point?
The statutory parties, and we're going to do party status
That's right.
Okay.
in a minute.
All right. Well, I have a dozen, so hopefully.
All right, while you're distributing that,
Share that with Brian.
we have the, what are known as the formal statutory parties, which are automatic participants in this hearing and recognized as such. Are there any other parties or individuals who request party status? Does the,
Yeah, as the homeowners of public homes, yes.
I'm sorry?
As the homeowners of public homes, yes.
Yes. Now, what criteria in particular are you requesting party status for?
Blasting.
Which would be?
Small blasting. That's it.
More for noise?
Vibration. That's the most important concern, that's all.
So that would be
90,
90.
earth extraction.
Keep it in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would be appropriate.
All right, so just 90.
That's it.
And just for clarification with that, are you representing the entire homeowners association for Poplar Commons or just yourself?
I'll get there. Since counselor's riding herd on me. Now, do you have any formal document appointing you as spokesperson for all of the residents in that community?
I do not. Steve Casabona is the president of Poplar Commons Homeowner Association, who was suddenly taken ill and he's in the hospital. And so I'm the almost unwilling, I'm a nurse.
So you're requesting party status for yourself, which is fine, because
Right.
you know what party status does.
A little bit, yes, sir.
What it says, in effect, if you are not happy with our ultimate decision, if we end up allowing for a permit,
Right.
you have a right of appeal.
I understand that.
So that, and to that extent, does the applicant have any objection to that request for party status?
We do not, from the town standpoint, we would request perhaps as a follow-up that if it's for the entire Poplar Commons, that something be filed formally.
We're dealing with an individual.
Okay. No objection with regard to 90.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute, let me just, you're, Attorney Fisher, you're representing the town, is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you a co-applicant?
Yes.
All right, so we have the applicant and the co-applicant, both councils agreeing.
Can I just ask, when you say he's representing the town, is the town or towns?
Town of Dummerston.
That's all right. We have the primary applicant and the secondary applicant. Is there anybody representing the town of Putney
Yes,
in a formal capacity?
yes.
And since you were late, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give on the matter under consideration is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Thank you. And for the record again, your name?
Cynthia Stoller.
Cynthia. And you are representing the town of Putney at this hearing. Do you have any objection to that party status request? Thank you. Good. Are there any other requests for party status? Yes, Ian.
Tim Severance, SB Lands. We are also a co-applicant.
Okay.
We have no issue with representing her.
You're a winner right now since everything's going so well. Good. And let's go with that. Everybody's been handed out now. Don't peek at this. I just want you to do this from memory.
Okay. I think I got it memorized at this point in the process.
All right.
But bear with me, I do want to highlight a few things.
Just remember the criteria that we have.
Yes, yes, I will. I think this is, so if I put this here, is that okay?
Yes.
That way everybody can see it, the camera can see it. All right. Stevens and Associates represents Renault Gravel Inc., who has teamed up with the towns of Dummerston and Putney and entered into an agreement to excavate gravel for all parties off of the Hidden Acres campground property. The proposed gravel pit is on the eastern side of the property in a wooded area. Through correspondence with SB Lands, who currently operates an existing gravel pit immediately to the north, they have also entered into an agreement to request today an application to join the operations and work together to excavate gravel from the existing gravel pit and work in a southerly direction across the property line so that we don't have to leave a 60-foot berm of gravel along the property line. Skipping ahead, it'll allow for better future land uses and take advantage of the earth resources that are there along the common property line. So that's the summary of what's before us today, is for all parties to be in the north pit, working the excavation from the common property line in a southerly direction until they get across the property line. Once an equitable amount of gravel has been excavated from the Renault parties and the SB Lands parties, then the SB Land pit would be reclaimed as originally proposed in their 2006 Act 250 permit. The SB Lands permit is simply an amendment to modify the limits of excavation from what was approved in 2006 to the property line. And we are also requesting blasting because they have encountered a considerable amount of ledge that in general runs along a ridge through the center of the proposed gravel, center of this gravel pit and the westerly side of the Renault pit. Peaking. We have obtained local zoning permits, site plan approval, conditional use approval, and variances needed for the project. Make sure you look at the slide about why we need gravel. The town of Dummerston has 51 miles of gravel roads. This is identified by Wyndham Regional Commission, town regional plans, and on the state's site resources map as a gravel deposit. And because of the relationship with the towns, it's going to save taxpayers a significant amount of money on gravel needed by the towns for the next 25 plus years. And Renault employs over 30 people that will also be employed as part of this proposed gravel pit. We started with working with many aspects of many criteria, which I won't go into a lot of depth on because we've resolved them. Archaeological, deer yard, agricultural soils, and dust and air pollution, although we did receive a comment from them yesterday. We talked to V-Trans early in the process, and we also reviewed the one wetland on the property with the state.
So let's get right to the request from the state yesterday, particularly 1B on the groundwater injection.
Yes.
Permit.
Yes.
I assume you haven't filed for that.
We have not filed for that.
You will be filing for
We will file for that if need be, yes. On 2 previous gravel pits that are very similar to this one, it was initially indicated to us that we might need that permit, and then after we discussed it with them in more detail and clarified, we were informed that the MSGP permit was more appropriate and we would not need the UIC permit. So as soon as I received that yesterday, I contacted that name, sorry, I forget her name. Yes, and discussed it with her, forwarded her our information from the previous gravel pits we've done, along with a request that she clarify whether this permit was needed. But yeah, we will certainly obtain that permit if needed.
Did she give you a response time in the way of acknowledging what you submitted, whether that's going to be compliance or not?
She did not.
She didn't give any indication?
No.
But you've already been in touch with Cynthia Fox?
Correct, yes. And we anticipated getting that permit 6 years ago on a previous gravel pit, and at the end of the day, they told us it wasn't needed. In 2008, we had the same conversation with them on a second gravel pit. They told us it wasn't needed, so I was a little surprised by that, because typically we reach out to organizations if we're going to anticipate a permit.
That's not open, so we'll get that request. You know that the permit requirements continue to change, so you should...
I do, yes, and I double-checked. The 2006 interim procedure for UIC permits is still in effect, the same procedure that was in effect for the 2 previous gravel pits. It's a different contact at the state. I'm not talking to Allison Lowry this time, so... Yeah.
So
He's right. It's been back and forth as to whether or not it's been required or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if the ultimate determination is required, there's no problem in filing.
But we have no problem filing for that permit, no. I think the biggest thing that I want to highlight is that we did an extensive public campaign with the people that live in the area. Particularly because the town was involved, they wanted to make sure to reach out to neighbors. It was over a year ago we had our first meeting with representatives of Poplar Commons. We invited folks within hundreds of feet of the property, including people this side of Route 5 and the neighbors to the north. Most of our conversations have been with the folks in the Poplar Commons neighborhood. They are not adjacent to the existing gravel pit, so they have many questions and appropriate concerns.
Well, our compliments to the applicant and the communities for their outreach, because it's very evident today that it's been a successful outreach by the number of people who have appeared, and it's a good way to do it. It should be the basis for any other applications. Good work. Now, moving along.
Just 2 more things, okay, sir? Okay, there have been some bumps in the road with the neighbors. There were a lot of appropriate concerns, and the project was significantly revised in order to do our best to mitigate those concerns to the best of our ability. And I'm sure that we'll get into them as we discuss the criteria, but just quickly to highlight some of them. We actually have a memo that was written to the DRB and CC to the neighbors that I'd like to submit today, because I think that does the best job. It's a little unique. We're proposing conditions on ourselves, but it summarizes the agreement with the Poplar Commons neighbors, and so I'd like to submit that today. It talks about having increased reviews at the DRB level as a result of the conditional use permit. It talks about stockpiling and vegetating the southern end of the pit before that pit were to come into view from Poplar Commons, and it will be additional noise mitigation, although noise at the Poplar Commons residence won't exceed 50 decibels. We've revised, actually we've requested hours of operation similar to the SB Lands permit. The proposed operation is geared towards kind of following in what SB Lands has approved. They only have they have less than 10 years of excavation remaining in their property, and then the idea is that we would have a similar operation that would continue on the Renault property. And then we also have highlighted an extensive monitoring that exceeds industry standards for the blasting in an effort to meet the concerns about vibration. And so that's in that August 13th memo. And we have much discussion on noise, I imagine. So I'll wait until we get to that criteria. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Was that 5 minutes?
Let's get to criteria 5 in traffic. And again, in pulling out of the campground this morning, I had some question of the site distance to the north.
Okay.
What is that site distance?
I know that it exceeds the recommended V-Trans standard, and I will find that.
Was I wrong in seeing that was a dip coming from the north before it comes up to the entrance?
No, you were not. No. It comes up the hill over a rise, and then but there is a...
So in doing your site distance, did you just take line of sight, or did you include the potential lack of sight coming up from that dip?
Included the potential lack of sight. I forget exactly how many feet off the ground it is that you need to be able to see for stopping sight distance. Mark might be able to tell us.
I think it's 500 feet.
You didn't raise your right hand.
The speed limit along this portion...
We're going to do that in a minute. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you're about to give on the matter under consideration is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I certainly do.
And your name is?
My name is Mark Pickering, with the Agency of Transportation.
It's a question on whether that site distance is adequate or not.
I believe the requirement is 500 feet. That was not part of the study done.
What happens when there's a dip in the road?
If I had to eyeball it, I'd say they're all right, but I'm sure they had it surveyed, and Corey could probably talk about what measurements they got.
I actually was the one that did the field visit with a wheel to measure the sight distances, and there is 500 feet of sight distance before the dip. And yep, and in our letter to V-Trans, we articulate the speed limit is 40 miles per hour, and sight distance exceed 500 feet in both directions, which is the requirement for that speed limit.
The speed limit on Route 5 there is what?
40 miles per hour.
And the actual speed on that?
Sir, I can't comment on how fast I started driving.
All right. So it's the applicant's contention that despite the chair's observation that the site distances are appropriate.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is my pen somewhere that was with this? Thank you.
I haven't had a chance to sign it yet.
Any comments on traffic criteria 5 and issues? Are there any questions or that on those criteria that the commission has found satisfactorily met, that we may have missed something? Any? Okay. Then let's get to criteria 8, aesthetics, noise. Any comments from the applicant on noise?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We have completed a noise study. We have done a lot of research, and we are confident that we can mitigate noise to the standard regulatory thresholds of 70 dBA at the property line and 55 dBA at residences and area of frequent use of all adjacent properties. We acknowledge that there was a house built adjacent to the SB Lands pit after the original permit, and therefore it was not included in the 2006 noise study, and our measurements indicate that it does exceed the 55 decibels, and again, in particular because the towns are involved, we are proposing to mitigate the noise at that residence to ensure that it comes down to acceptable levels.
How are you going to mitigate?
There are several options for mitigation. The first strategy would be to construct a berm at the edge of the gravel pit, and there are also supplemental kind of the gravel pit machines that will cause the loudest noise, crushing, screening, drilling, can have aftermarket products that could be added to them to further mitigate noise if needed.
There are buffers, mufflers. Is that what you do?
A muffler on the engine of the crusher and screener, I'm sure, is one option. That's not something that's specifically come up in our conversations yet. We are, for the trucks, proposing to mitigate mufflers to European noise standards, which is already a condition on the SB Lands permit. And so again, we're just asking to follow with those same conditions for the Renault permit.
What type of aftermarket is there for Hammer?
There are now, and my terminology is not going to be.
That's right, I wouldn't understand.
Yeah,
that.
so I'm going to call them pads that can be placed on the tower, and then my personal feeling is the most effective thing to do, if needed, is to actually construct mobile noise.
Baffles or some sort?
Yeah, it's a wall. It's a 12-foot wall that comes in segments, and it can be arranged to be close enough to the drill rig to provide mitigation for a day's worth of operation, and then it would have to be moved for the next day. But
any comments? Nobody?
No, we've talked about it with Mr. Renault about this already at quite detail.
Wonderful. Wonderful. It's a perfect example of how this commission loves to have the parties talk to each other so we don't have to work too hard.
Well, we want to be a good neighbor.
Great. Okay. Nine D and E, Earth Resources. Let's get to the blasting. Did I see 18 blasts with this permit? Are we requesting 18 blast opportunities? Must have been.
no, there is a good portion of the gravel pit which has ledge below ground. And in fact, on the SB Lands property, they have exposed ledge as part of their operation. Both properties, with the SB Lands approval is for 30,000 cubic yards of extraction per year. The Renault property is requesting 30,000 cubic yards per year.
In addition to SB, or
That's right. In addition, no, that's in addition.
60,000.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. I view it as two different operations. I know that under this application we have one application number and one hearing, but it's important that we remember there's already an existing operation and we are adding a second operation.
But they're switching to one entry and egress, is that correct?
Actually, they are not. Can we go back to traffic for a minute? Because I think this is very important to the neighbors of SB Lands. Their access currently comes in Winterbell Drive, and that will remain. The Renault property is going to have an access road that comes in behind ABF, so that all the trucks from Renault and the town of Dummerston, the town of Putney, have a separate access directly on Route 5, and there is no additional traffic added to the Winterbell Drive and the SB Lands traffic.
Now, from 6 years ago.
Anytime you want to give me that pen back would be great.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll use my own pen. How's that?
Thank you.
I guess I'm a slow writer.
So while the permit is in addition to the existing operation, in effect, they're still going to be run to some extent, as separate operations as the way of product movement and product extraction?
Yes. I imagine that they've all reached agreements, most of them in writing at this point, on how this is going to unfold. And we just had a conversation last week about, for cost effectiveness, if nothing else, sharing equipment, sharing stockpiles. There's a paperwork aspect of that they have to figure out, but they will each have their own operation.
So when SB hires their crusher, they're going to time it to the same way as the other operation. So once the crusher's on location, you're just going to move it over to the
That
substation.
is the plan. I mean, it makes the most economic sense. And a lot of the big reason is economics for the town, for their materials. So to do something out of line that would make it less economical for them just wouldn't make sense.
Would you, for the record, file those agreement documents with the commission? You have no problem doing that? Is
Right,
okay?
the lease right now is not signed, but
If you
Chris and I
could submit the drafts, and then when
Sure.
they're executed, if you would submit those
Sure.
too, so we have that. Let's go back to blasting. How many blasts do you anticipate at both sites?
So we are requesting, because we don't know exactly how many yards of blasting will be needed on an annual basis in order to make sure that we're covered. Because if you're working on the east side of the pit, there won't be any ledge. If you're working on the west side of the pit, there's going to be a significant amount of ledge. Thomas Drilling and Blasting works a lot with Renault, and they have been involved in this discussion. They can blast 600 yards per day. So each operation is requesting 30 days of blasting on an annual basis.
60 days of blasting.
Potentially. Again, we hope that there's a large efficiency because you have the same contractor mobilizing, but that would provide, in round numbers, 18,000 yards of potential ledge to be processed on an annual basis out of the 30,000 that each operation has.
How many blasts per day? You're asking for 60 blasting days. How many blasts per day? Or do you want 60 blasts?
It would need to be more,
Well, 6 times 6 is 36.
You're talking about, you're not talking, now, I need to ask a clarifying question. Are you talking about individual charges, or are you talking about an event in which all the charges go off and a quote, blast event occurs?
A blast can have multiple charges, correct?
That would be my understanding, yes.
In a blasting day, how many blasts, not charges, blasts? So you can end up with a heck of a lot more than 60 blasts if you're doing 4 or 5 or 6 a day.
Correct. And I don't know the answer to that question. We have a blasting plan that was submitted, and I will see if I can find that information in the blasting plan. Perhaps Mike has an idea of, in general, when you have a contractor on site blasting, how many times did they blast during the day?
Well, that is kind of governed by how much vibration you want, and we don't want to see very many, make too much vibration.
Based on the load, the greater the load, the greater the vibration.
That is correct.
What are you going to do to seismic measure the vibration at the residences abutting?
May we submit that August 13th memo now, and we'll go over those monitoring agreements. And while we're at it, Scott Dillon sent me a agency sign-off letter yesterday, and he asked me to submit that.
That's
as
historic preservation.
Archaeological and historic preservation. So while I'm thinking of it, I'd like to give you that. Do you need just the one copy?
No, you'll talk to April and see what's required because all the statutory parties need it. unless he submitted it.
No,
Did
no, he
did
didn't. He sent it to Corey for Corey to distribute.
So
Would you like me to give you a copy now? April? Is that irrelevant?
Take a copy now, but it's have to,
Okay.
I'm surprised it's not. That's going to have to be distributed to all statutory parties.
Okay.
So I assume he said there's no archaeological impact.
That is correct, at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Yes. Can I give statutory parties a copy now?
No. We need a certificate.
Here's for your reference.
Yes, you can have it. We need a...
Okay, I got to do a certificate of service, fair enough. You know this one?
Did I miss this? You said this was done on August 13th. Was this submitted prior to this?
It was not, and that it is articulated in the criteria of the Act 250 application. The hours of operation, the mitigation for visibility. It occurred to me that the specific monitoring proposal for the vibration was not included under criteria. Is it 8?
Probably 9K.
9.
Excuse me. 9D.
And so we thought the best thing to do would be to just submit this memo today, because this writes it right out. So the blasting...
One of the reasons that we're addressing that criteria is because we didn't find that there was adequate information provided. You've had this since August 13th?
Yes. An oversight on my part, I apologize.
And this deals with the sensitive issue, is particularly the ground vibrations and what impact it's going to have on...
That's right, that's right. And Kelly was at the meeting in which this was discussed and agreed upon. And in essence, we are going to monitor from the start. The blasting plan identifies monitoring any structures within 200 feet, which is the industry standard, but because of the concerns of the neighbors, we will blast at the distances identified, the septic tanks of the Poplar Commons, at the foundations of Casabona and Kelly McHugh's home, and at a distance 400 feet south of the current blasting location. And the reason that we will go 400 feet south of whichever location we are blasting is because when we get to the southern end of the pit, 25, 30 years from now, we will be approximately 400 feet from the property line of the Poplar Commons neighborhood. And so that will give us an indication as we move south over the years, what are the vibrations that are being observed 400 feet south, so that if we're causing significant vibrations, we can adjust our plan.
And all of the parties have agreed to the hours of operation as well?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. So there is a monitoring plan. All of the abutters have agreed to it. All of the parties have agreed to it. Okay.
I do have a question about that. So you're monitoring and you see that there's an impact. What happens?
We change our plan. We do less charges per blast. Certainly, we don't want to affect septic tanks or homes, and I would imagine that because of the impact that we may have, worst case scenario, I guess we'd have to stop blasting the ledge as we move south, right?
Yes.
We're not going to make a home fall down.
I don't want to.
Yeah. We're confident that that they blast immediately adjacent to homes and infrastructure improvements all the time, and that by modifying their procedures, that we can ensure that there are no impacts.
And if somebody decides to build a new home somewhere in that area?
Well, it would have to be Mike building the home, because we will be greater than 400 feet from any common property line with all of our blasting.
So what happened at the existing pit, there's no likelihood of that happening where that somebody constructed a new home
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess that would be true that Tim and David could also build a home on their property, but the blasting is going to be in this area here, and so we have greater than, the V-Trans property is closer than 400 feet. Again, the industry standard is indicated to be 200 feet, so I can't say that no homes will be built, but that would be a surprise to us.
What are you going to do in the way of notice to all of the folks around when there's a blast coming?
Notification will be given to the 9 properties of Poplar Commons plus the Danforth Gold property at 270 Carpenter Road 48 hours prior to blasting. A pre-blast and post-blast survey will be completed with video in and around the residence of concern in accordance with the schedule below prior to every blasting session for that year of operation. Surveys will not be completed on years in between.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Notification, what's that mean?
I guess we haven't clarified that, whether it would be a phone call or a letter. Did we discuss that at the town level? I don't think we did actually talk about.
The most common methods are today, where people have it available, is having it done electronically, as well as those who I would let all of the various potential parties advise the applicant how they would like to receive that notice, as well as posting the notices in the various town offices, so that there's a public awareness of it as well. So I would probably survey the parties of potential impact to see how they would like to be notified at least 48 hours in advance. At least 48 hours.
With regard to the survey that you've got in here, Corey, already, that survey could include how they wish to be notified, email, etc. So as they're doing that, then you build that right in.
There are 2 ways of ending a hearing. One is to adjourn, which means that the commission will then do its deliberations and determine whether or not to issue a permit, or if so, what the conditions are. The other is to recess, where we would then circulate what's known as a recess memo and try and clear up some of these loose ends. And I would expect at the conclusion of today's hearing, we will recess and issue a recess memo to memorialize those issues that we still need, some, like the number of blasts or how long, any documents signed, the notification, anything else that surfaces. The faster we get a response on that recess memo, the more expeditiously the commission can act. So that's how we do it.
Sure. In reference to the monitoring locations, as you just mentioned, Corey, that our District 2 V-Trans facility is within 400 feet. I don't see a mention of monitoring happening on our property.
No, and I think the applicants would probably be willing to add it.
Okay.
The industry standard is 200 feet, and because of the particular concerns of the neighbors, that's how this agreement developed. So
I think the state of Vermont would appreciate that. And we've buried, buried fuel tanks, wells, septics. There's potential impact there as well.
Yes.
I
So maybe at the
I think you'd plan for an underground gas tank.
Right. Potentially at the property line?
Yeah.
Because the fuel tanks are probably closer to the property line than the building.
Yeah, the tanks are probably 150 feet from the property line, I would imagine.
Corey, is that going to be only property within 400 feet of the blast?
Will that property be?
No, I say, when we're doing blasting, that's only within 400 feet of the blast. I mean, if we're already been blasting, we'll move further, we may down the road, we end up 800 feet away. I mean, would it make sense to keep monitoring, 800 feet away?
The initial blasting is going to be the closest to your buildings
right
on your property.
Oh yeah, I would have no concern if you guys are
So maybe we'll
800,000 feet away.
Why don't you try and resolve that offline?
Okay.
Come up with
Yes, sir.
something. And I see what you're saying, is as the blasts move, do you have to keep monitoring?
Right.
Okay.
And as we're getting
Yeah.
closer to commons, we want to be more stringent with our,
I expect that you can develop the appropriate wording. We'll get that resolved. So everything okay so far at the commons?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. 9K, the public investment, I-90. Okay. Let's talk about reclamation. Where are you in reclaiming the existing pit?
We are maybe 25%. We've got excavation going on the whole southern boundary, so that's probably our largest area. We haven't touched or attempted reclamation because that's where all the ledge is.
So could you speak up, please?
We have the most area that we haven't dealt with reclamation would be on the southern boundary. I would say we're probably in the neighborhood of 25% reclaimed. Slope.
On the northern part.
On the northern and western, where we abut the state property, that's pretty much remained as it was. It's vegetated and whatnot. On the north and the south, we're still using the full area of the pit, so we haven't done much in reclamation.
How many acres do you have open right now, roughly?
It's not the whole thing. In excess of 10, maybe.
Would you like me to try and estimate?
No, his estimate is good enough.
That's good. Thank you.
And they secured, the SB Land has secured their reclamation fund a cash bond that the town holds for them. And if I might speak to the reclamation plan of
And you are?
our pit. I'm Tom Woodett, the Dummerston Select Board. Our agreement, which you'll get a copy of when all the parties have signed it, articulates that we've agreed on a 6 cent per yard tariff essentially, which goes into a reclamation fund, which will be held in escrow by the town of Dummerston. And this was calculated by the amount of gravel on site and what the estimated reclamation cost would be as we reclaim on a rolling basis, 5 yards at a time. I believe the number was $80,000 total over time. So there will always be a cash reserve there to provide for reclamation.
That's actual cash, not a bond?
No, it'll be cash. It'll be a 6 cent per yard payable monthly as the gravel is removed.
cash is king.
Who keeps the interest?
Oh, I think the town of Dummerston, for their trouble, probably.
Just want to know. Okay. What else you got?
That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Let's go to the, what are the folks heading north and south on I-91 in the city?
Heading, start with north on 91. We don't anticipate that they will see anything.
You don't anticipate? You don't know, or you don't?
I have taken pictures. I have visited the site. I've walked up and down that bank, and I have cross sections that were submitted as part of our plans that show that we are maintaining a minimum 5-foot berm with vegetation on it, so that excavation will always be down below a berm. So line of sight should not be to equipment. Obviously, trees at the top of the bank will be cut down, so you won't see trees as high up as you used to on that slope, because we will be working our way down.
That's on the slope by the campground?
Now that's on this slope. There is approximately a 70-foot elevation change from I-91 up to this gravel pit.
Up to the gravel.
Up to the gravel pit. And so this entire slope is treed. And so as we come down in elevation, those trees will be cut.
The trees on the crown will be cut.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. But there will always be, I could measure it, there will always be a significant buffer horizontally from I-91 that remains treed, and a buffer vertically going up the slope with trees that will remain on it.
And going south?
Going south, you currently see from farther south, you're significantly farther north when you're driving south. You're not adjacent to the pit, and you can see into the face of the existing pit. You see the excavation of that existing pit.
From further north?
Yes, I mean, you have to be a quarter, half a mile up the highway, maybe even farther, and you can see across these fields and into the face of this pit. This is all vegetated and will remain so. So once you approach the pit, your view of that open excavation is eliminated, and as you drive by the pit, actually in this case you're even farther down in elevation below the pit, and driving by there will...
So visual time driving south would be 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds estimate?
On that base?
Yeah, as you're driving south.
Well, I'd say no more than 5 seconds, because I've tried looking up there when I'm coming down. You really can't.
How fast you driving?
65 miles an hour. No, I tried to look at that, you know, just being curious. It really is hard to take any further.
I'd just like to know how close the excavation will be to the traveled way, Interstate 91. Our only concern out there would be clouds of, a cloud of dust crossing the travel lane of the highway, creating a hazard for the traveling public.
It's not going to be any closer than it is now, right?
It will be slightly closer, because, your property...
It's behind that hill, right?
That's correct, yep, behind the hill. And so...
No.
Right, we'll mitigate for dust. It's per comment.
That's right.
It's a pretty tight gravel. It's not really a dusty gravel.
Yeah, that would be our only concern.
Is that all gravel, or are you going to sand out of there as well?
We'll be taking some road sand out of there.
The closest point that we will get to I-91 is 200 feet horizontally.
Behind it?
From the edge of the traveled way to the edge of excavation will be 200 feet.
Where?
Oh, sorry. Right here will be the closest point. You can see how I-91 diverges from the edge of excavation. So in this area right here, it's 200 feet horizontal.
That's behind a tree line?
Yes, I would say 170 feet of that is vegetated.
And what is the highway right of way there?
Well, it's approximated here as being halfway, so it's 100.
I'm assuming you had it surveyed and that's nailed down.
Yes. Yeah, there was a survey. We didn't actually do it. There was an existing survey on the property from years ago.
Thanks.
And so, Mark, the right-of-way is about 90 feet from edge of pavement, so 110 feet from...
Okay, so it'll be 20 feet with it from the right-of-way of I-91 with excavation.
No, 110 feet.
110 feet from the edge of right-of-way?
Yes,
okay.
To the edge of excavation.
All right.
Yep. And the DRB put a condition on the permit that I had forgotten about, that actually 10-foot wide vegetated berm, minimum 4 feet high. We're actually proposing 5 feet high along the edge of excavation parallel to I-91, and we'll actually exceed that.
One of the last sentence of the state's entry of appearance yesterday request MSDS sheets from the blaster for the explosives being used so that they certify they don't contain perchlorate, whatever that is.
Perchlorate.
Huh?
Perchlorate.
Perchlorate. I guess it's a no-no stuff. So could you get some MSDS sheets up to the agency and certify that you met that compliance?
Yes.
Okay. What else have we got? Again, this is a perfect example of when the parties do their homework. So there will be a recess memo. We will get that out to you as expeditiously as possible. I sense a certain amount of desire for quick movement.
I'd like to hit the ground running in the spring.
Okay, well, we can do that. We'll set a response date for any comments very quickly, and we'll get to work on this. And hearing no objections, yes, Corey?
Not objecting at all.
I have a question.
I would ask that you consider the review time frame of the permits that are still needed in your response time, and if you'd like, I can be in touch with you after I've talked to the agencies and know exactly what their expected review time is.
Because we can't finish anything till all outstanding state permits.
Right. I mean, ideally, we'd like, if we could, have approval with the condition that those permits need to be received.
We'll take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question about the recess. So we cease the meeting today, and then you'll reconvene another meeting. Is that correct?
No.
How does that? What does that mean?
What will happen is we will issue a recess memo, and if all of the responses are adequate and there's no outstanding issues, we would then adjourn the hearing subsequent to the responses to the recess memo. I don't anticipate needing another hearing to conclude this.
Okay. Thank you.
Then we're going to try again. Hearing no objections, this hearing is recessed. And as quickly as you all vacate this room, we can do some preliminary deliberations. So, goodbye all. Thank you.